Hello.
Hey, so good to meet you.
I'm Maya.
I'm Lisa Beale.
Nice to meet you. This is an awesome ship.
This is our research vessel, Walton Smith. The really cool thing about the Walton Smith, she's kind of small, but she has a super low draft. So we can take her in really snug places like in the Florida Bay. For our cruise, we're going to go out to the center of the Florida Straits, though, so in the teeth of the Gulf Stream.
The Gulf Stream is a powerful surface current and a vital component of the largest heat transfer on Earth, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC. The AMOC acts as a global conveyor belt, moving warm surface water north and cold deep water south, helping to regulate our global climate. Recently, the AMOC has gotten a lot of attention because climate models suggest that the rapid melting of the Greenland ice sheet should lead to this circulation's disruption or even collapse, a scenario with almost unimaginable consequences.
If the AMOC tips, well, where I live, the climate suddenly gets incredibly greater seasonality, cold, harsh winters and even hotter summers. But I'd be most concerned in the tropics because we would potentially lose the monsoon in West Africa, which would be a humanitarian catastrophe, and also disrupt the monsoon in India severely, which is the livelihoods of over a billion people. And it also disrupts the rainfall over the Amazon, so threatens this crucial harbour of biodiversity and indigenous peoples. And also, when the AMOC tips, it raises the sea level around large parts of the North Atlantic. And then what's happening is it's leaving heat behind in the Southern Ocean, so it's risking bringing forward the tipping points for the Antarctic ice sheets.
Not only do climate models suggest that global warming should disrupt the AMOC, but scientists also believe that during past periods of significant warming, such as the transition out of the last ice age, the AMOC may have significantly weakened or even shut down entirely. The problem is that determining if this process has already started again has proven to be very tricky because we only have about 20 years of direct observational data on the AMOC. But Lisa and her colleague Chris may have found a solution.
In the future, under global warming, the large-scale Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation will reduce with climate change. That, I think, we're all agreed on. What there's more ambiguity on is whether the overturning circulation has already weakened.
And this is where the Gulf Stream comes in. Since the Gulf Stream is a key surface current within the AMOC, any signs of it slowing down could indicate that the AMOC itself is losing strength. And in a groundbreaking study, Chris and Lisa found a way to extend the observational record of the Gulf Stream by decades using underwater telecommunication cables.
We combined a number of different observational data sets to look at how the strength of the Gulf Stream has changed over the last 40 or 50 years. And, we believe statistically, we found a robust weakening.
That finding allows researchers to compare what the models say about the AMOC with the observations of the Gulf Stream.
Over this same 4-decade period, where the climate models unambiguously say we should have seen weakening, we do see a comparable weakening in the observations of the Gulf Stream.
We put those together and say it's likely that that weakening in the Gulf Stream is related to a weakening in the AMOC. And so maybe we're actually observing for the first time a robust signal, a robust weakening in the overturning.
Big news. Weathered just released our first TV show. Weathered Earth's Extremes is everything you love about Weathered, but bigger and better. We traveled all around the world to tell the definitive story about our changing weather and climate, and how a better future is within reach. To support us and help us do more seasons, you can watch the series on your smart TV on the PBS app for free. You can also watch it on pbs.org at the link below. We put so much into this show, and we can't wait for you to watch it.